Hi, everybody. This is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and this is your horoscope for Friday, March 15th, 2019. So, inevitably, around 3 times each year, I get a flood of questions about Mercury retrogrades, retrogrades in general, the meaning of whatever particular retrograde we're experiencing. It's natural that people should want answers, since if you spend even just 10 to 20 minutes per day on social media these days, you'll notice that A, everyone is now an astrologer. B, during Mercury retrogrades, everyone is posting about it. And C, weird things actually happen during Mercury retrogrades that make even non-believers take up the lingo, even if it's just a temporary superstition or part of the gossip around the water cooler. So here are some things to know about Mercury retrograde, or any retrograde, and this particular Mercury retrograde in Pisces. There are two motions in the sky that ancient mystics, philosophers, and astrologers paid attention to: the primary motion and the secondary motion. The primary motion brings all of the planets and all of the stars along the ecliptic, which we call the zodiac, from rising to culminating to setting to anti-culminating and rising again in 24 hours. This, of course, happens day in and day out all year long. For ancient philosophers and mystics, this primary motion of the sky, sometimes also called the diurnal motion, was related to that which is eternal, to that which is divine, unchanging, the realm of the ideas or forms, God, etc. The other motion that we see in the sky is related to the planets. Each of the planets moves against the grain of this primary motion, comparatively very slowly. The planets move from west toward the east, slowly moving through the zodiac and the backdrop of the fixed stars. Planets in this sense, each with their own individual speeds, appear to move in the opposite direction as the primary motion. We call this the secondary motion of the planets. Planets in general, as the agents of karma, or indicators of the laws of karma in the material universe, are related to the realm of coming to be and passing away, or the realm of temporary materiality. This material realm is thought to be a reflection of the divine realm. But just as the word planet meant wanderer, and or graha in Indian astrology as in grabber, if we focus on the material realm of the planets, then just as the planets and material universe itself cycles endlessly through repeated cycles of death and rebirth, so too we will find ourselves helplessly swept along by the forces of material nature, forgetting, or simply not recognizing, or even forcefully denying the existence of that which is eternal, of the soul who partakes in eternality. So retrogrades are interesting because a planet, like our current Mercury, who is retrograde in Pisces, is going along against the flow of the primary motion, a wanderer following its own separative whims and ambitions, much as we souls who incarnate here do. But then it slows down, stops, and starts moving backward, falling back into a kind of alignment with the primary motion, seeming to be captured by the greater, swifter eternality of the primary motion. We translate this to mean that a planet loses something of its agency, perhaps something of its ability to be the controller, and in this sense it is debilitated, though it should be noted that in Indian astrology, a planet that is retrograde is sometimes said to be strengthened. A planet stopping and then falling back into the primary motion, so to speak, moving backward, may indicate reversals of fortune, delays, revisions, revisiting the past, loss of control, a turn or twist of plot, giving back what has been gained, and more. All of this comes from the image or the symbolism of the planet moving forward in its own separative path and then falling backward into the greater motion that contains everything. So however difficult all of this may sound, there's also a distinct sense during retrogrades that something bigger, sometimes benefic, or even helpful is entering the picture, taking the wheel. The spiritual is intervening in the normal material flow. We can't go it alone any longer. Sometimes disruptions are divine. Sometimes letting go or being made to let go, we remember what matters. Sometimes giving up the illusion of control, we remember to stay curious. Awe and mystery return and we open our hearts again. So even when there are serious reversals or delays, we can only call a Mercury retrograde bad or good in a material sense. The value of a retrograde from a spiritual standpoint depends on whether or not we are cultivating our spiritual consciousness. It's harder without a spiritual practice, and I consider astrology to be a kind of spiritual practice, to go beyond the good or bad of a transit. We also still need the language of good and bad because we aren't out to deny the reality of the material world and its dualities either. Sometimes people will ask, why was this retrograde easy for me and why was this other one so rough? Similarly, you will see people berating Mercury retrogrades while you'll see others praise them as highly productive periods. There is no one-size-fits-all description of mundane planetary transits. Planetary transits are as numerous in their significations and as flexible as a deck of tarot cards in terms of the different range of people and situations they can address. So while we can generally say things based upon the archetypal dynamics of a transit in question, like a Mercury retrograde in Pisces, we can't say exactly what each retrograde means because it has the signifying power over countless beings who each have individual karmic trajectories. In the same way that we can say it will rain, and rain generally feels like this: wet, moist, refreshing, depressing. We can't say exactly how the rain will affect each individual because context is everything. This is one of the reasons that the study of karma in astrology cannot be easily jammed into an empirical study. Context is its own highly objective factor in astrology. Without context, the planets are highly subjective. Once you have the objective parameters of personal context, things get more specific and able to be more accurately predicted. For this reason, you'll see many astrologers trying to tell one big, grand narrative about each transit, trying to imagine that we are collectively going through one big spiritual experience together. And usually this kind of story expresses itself in terms of positivism, progress, the future, evolution, growth. Everything is about waking up or progressing toward a higher state. Most of the time, this higher state is also intimately tied to a somewhat narcissistic view of ourselves, our life dramas, the overimportance of whatever daily or weekly events are happening to us, which we can now see as part of a mass spiritual evolution. Well, let's be clear. It's not that there isn't a collective or public dimension to these transits. Often enough, you can see these transits in the news. You can see them throughout history. But this doesn't change the fact that each retrograde is different because each person's karmic clock is unique. In order to see how a retrograde may affect a person, we typically need to look at things like profections, time lords, transits in relation to a natal chart. For this reason, it's not smart to preach either the goodness or the badness of retrogrades. They will be both for different people at different times. It also doesn't help to preach that all retrogrades are good because they could be spiritually valuable to us. While it's true that they can be good for us, ask yourself this question. If someone had just lost a beloved pet or a friend or even a family member, would you say, oh, this is good for you? This is a lesson. You can see this from a spiritual perspective. No. Maybe in time. But we can't pretend to be more evolved than we are. We're still human, and the subjective realm of human dualities has a reality of its own that we need to respect. For this reason, when a client asks me if a retrograde is going to be good or bad, I try to give it to them straight, based on a careful study of their individual karma. I don't recommend we treat retrogrades with any less sensitivity or specificity when considering them in social media forums. Also, just because something good happens during a Mercury retrograde, like the sale or purchase of a computer goes smoothly, doesn't mean that Mercury retrograde gave you a pass. Just because a computer sale didn't go well or you got a virus doesn't mean Mercury retrograde messed you up either. People buy computers on all days of the year, and often they go bad, and often they go well. The significations of Mercury are unique to each individual, and they change during different seasons of our lives. Sometimes Mercury may have something to do with travel or technology, it's true, but often enough it has more to do with your health, or a friend, or a sibling, or a lover, or your boss, or something else. Mercury is not limited to communication, the mind, travel, and technology. These are some of Mercury's natural significations, but planets are not limited to their own natural significations. Planets can take on the role or play the part of a wide variety of different things. When a retrograde comes up, you'll seldom understand its message if you only look at the planet's natural significations. Okay, did I get a taxi on time? Did my Uber arrive on time? Did I manage to not get a virus on my computer? Okay, it was a good Mercury retrograde. We need the specificity or context of our personal life, of our birth charts. Okay, so Mercury retrogrades can bring up the usual reversals, delays, challenges, etc. All of these related to Mercury's natural significations. It's true. But the other things we always need to take into account involve Mercury's current sign situation, aspects being made to Mercury during the retrograde period, and this goes for any planet that's retrograde. Right now, Mercury is in Jupiter's feminine home sign of Pisces, where it is said to be both in its detriment or exile, and its fall, or sometimes it's called a depression. Mercury is therefore in a place that marks its decrease or decline. If Mercury represents the comings and goings of fortune for so many different people in so many different areas of life, the most general thing that can be said about it being in its detriment or fall is that it marks a decrease or decline of fortune. However, being in Jupiter's home, Jupiter brings benefits. Jupiter is the planet of benefit. So a simple formula is that through Mercury's current misfortunes, there are benefits. For example, if a person's rational control breaks down, they might find faith. They might find their intuition again. Or if some kind of delay or misfortune occurs, something good may come out of it, some subjectively tangible benefit. So not all is lost. On the other hand, with Jupiter in a superior square to Mercury right now, Jupiter has the upper hand. If Mercury insists upon something right now from its lowly position or tries to assert its will too strongly, it's likely to feel nothing but a loss of control or power and eventual misfortune, perhaps, as a result of not being humble. I'm personifying the planet here, but you can think about it creatively and think of how it might apply to your life. On a deeper level, we should ask ourselves why this phenomenon about retrogrades itself keeps coming back. 3 times a year, predictably, just as predictably as anything else in astrology, I get a flood of exactly the same questions about Mercury, about retrogrades. Mercury spends about 1/3 of the year in its retrograde phases. It's the quintessential planet of retrogrades, and perhaps the gateway in popular consciousness to astrology. Mercury retrogrades seem to invite people into astrology, even people who may not otherwise believe, because everyone's open to a good superstition if it just so happens to be true often enough. Mercury is the quintessential planet of retrogrades. So what can we learn from all of this? Yesterday in my series on the Hermetica, I read a brief excerpt called The Circle of Time, wherein Hermes, who we now call Mercury, says, in a sense, the cosmos is changeless, because its motions are determined by unalterable laws which cause it to revolve eternally without beginning and end. Its parts manifest, disappear, and are created anew again and again and again in the undulating pulse of time. The present issues from the past and the future from the present. Everything is made one by this continuity. Time is like a circle where all the points are so linked that you cannot say where it begins or ends, for all points both precede and follow one another forever. So I like to come back to the simplest image. The planets move forward like pioneers, eager for their future, eager for progress, eager for the big story taking us forward, eager to desire and explore their own separative interests, live their own stories against the grain of the primary motion. But then, again and again and again, endlessly they fall back. No matter how hard they might try to move forward without end, the end comes and they fall back. Something about this image relieves me. Prayer for the day. Relieve us of our cycling and circling without end. Show us the way home through the forests of our back and forth.